preventing violence against women and girls should be as much of a priority as counter-terrorism. That is according to the report that is published by the police watchdog today.
The report's author, Zoe Billingham, calls on chief constables to get a grip on the epidemic of crimes against women. And Zoe joins us now, along with Abi Blake, a domestic abuse survivor and campaigner. Good morning to both of you. Thank you for joining us. Zoe, let's come to you first, because I think the thing that constantly surprises me is when you look at the statistics that are involved with these cases. And this very stark line that 3 out of 4 domestic abuse cases reported are closed early without the suspect being charged. It's extraordinary that we're still in a situation where that is the case. Why is that happening, Zoe?
It is, Ben, and this report is really wide-ranging, and we look at a whole range of issues. And morning to Abi as well. It's lovely to see you here. Basically, what we're saying is that there needs to be a complete change in approach to the way violence against women and girls is tackled. I think the horrific killing of Sarah Everard really awakened the woman's voice, saying enough is enough. And actually, what we now need is to accept that the police alone cannot solve this problem. There needs to be a requirement on all local partners, so local authorities and schools and teachers and the health service and probation services and the courts to properly work together to prevent crime from happening in the first place and to take really effective action when it does.
The death of Sarah Everard was just horrific, obviously, mostly for her family, but touched so many people and awakened a whole outpouring on social media and amongst conversations between people of the fear that violence against women pervades. And when you look at the statistics for the years 2009 to 2019, a staggering girl, dies every 3 days because of violence. That is staggering. But also, I wonder if there is something special about violence against women, particularly because when you look at the horrific figures against men, I mean, men are 3 times more likely than women to suffer from murder. And in fact, in the year ending March 2020, violence against women went down slightly and violence against men went up. So there's no doubting the importance of preventing violence against men and women. But why is there a particular focus on women, do you think? And why is that important?
Yeah. Okay, really good question. It is important because there's certain crimes that do disproportionately affect women and girls. And, you know, just to give you a couple of examples, 8 out of 10 victims of stalking, of voyeurism, of exposure are women and girls. And what I find absolutely staggering is 81% of sexual activity with children under 16 is against girls. And of the domestic abuse victims, there's 1.6 million domestic abuse victims who are women. The highest harm, highest risk victims, 98% of those are women. So what we're looking at is an issue where there is a disproportionality. Women are more likely to become victims, and therefore a proper tailored approach needs to be taken to address these particular types of crimes.
Abi, we've talked to you in the past about your situation and what you went through. Some of our viewers may not be aware of it. So if you don't mind, will you share a little bit of your experience as a victim of domestic abuse and equally what you make of this report?
I had been suffering from domestic abuse for almost 3 years. It was something that I hadn't recognised was domestic abuse until it had escalated to such a point from the coercive behaviour, the emotional abuse. It then moved into a different level of violence, and it reached such a point that I ended up almost dead. And one evening I was severely attacked and left with injuries that were life-threatening. I had a broken neck, an encroached spinal cord that caused a bleed, a hole in my lung and 5 broken ribs. Yeah, it's taken me years to build myself back up together physically and psychologically.
Sarah Everard was walking alone and walking at night and killed. Yours came out of domestic violence, which crept up. Is that part of the problem, women understanding, and does this report address and help that? You know, the victims of abuse sort of being enabled to try and come forward, because it is devastating to read that so many cases don't ever get to a point of a suspect being arrested, because it must make it harder to come forward.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, there's so many inconsistencies with local authorities and multi-agencies. One, they don't work together harmoniously, so that's very difficult in terms of if you make a report or you speak to one agency, it doesn't get passed on to another. At the same time, there's the stigma, which I've mentioned before. So it's associated, usually, domestic abuse with low socio-economic classes, various ethnicities, and there's the shame. There's the assumption that if it's so bad that you'll leave, if it's that bad, you know, why don't you just walk away? Why do you stay in something like this? Just a lot of people don't want to get involved when it comes to the term or the wording domestic abuse. So many people turn their backs and walk away, don't want to help. And unfortunately, I think it's just education that we need to keep putting out there about it.
Is there anything in this report that gives you hope that actually the approach from the police forces is going to change, and there is going to be a move towards making sure that those figures, the 3 and 4 figure that we talked about earlier, changes?
I'd like to think there was hope. Unfortunately, I can't see how it's actually going to be implemented. So from what I read, I saw that actions were going to be taken, but I just didn't understand exactly what actions are going to be taken and how they're going to be taken and rolled out throughout the whole of England and Wales consistently, from the police forces to the various authorities.
And you can't see that happening because there's not the resource to put into place. They don't have the numbers of police officers. There's not the communication between the police forces.
Yeah, correct. I don't think there's enough funding. Certainly not the funding that there is that goes into counter-terrorism.
I mean, Zoe, what do you make of that? Because a report is one thing, it's a good step, but now it has to become action. Can you bring comfort on that?
Yeah, I mean, Abi's also spot on in terms of the things that need to change. And obviously, I'm so sorry about the horrific experience and injuries that Abi has suffered. And she's quite right. It's so important for women and girls to continue to come forward. But I think that the stars are aligned, Kate, in this. I think post the horrific murder of Sarah Everard, there's a groundswell of opinion. There's an awakening, as you've described it, in women saying enough is enough. The Home Secretary commissioned our report. She's very clear in her new strategy on violence against women and girls that this has to stop. And today, as we publish the report, there is universal acceptance of the findings in this report to say that this needs to happen. And I think it's absolutely incumbent on all of those partners to make this happen. It's not going to happen unless there's a relentless focus on this, unless there's sufficient funding in place, and that, yes, we do start to treat these crimes with the seriousness of other types of crimes that have been mentioned, serious and organised crime, counter-terrorism, terrorism and so on. But we know that there's a will. We've identified a way. I think the stars have aligned, and I'm very optimistic that there will be significant generational change as a result of this.
Well, let's hope so, because we certainly need to see something happening, don't we? Thank you both very much for joining us, Zoe Billingham and Abi Blake. Abi, it's good to see you in the studio as well. Thanks so much. If you've been affected by any of these issues, then you can find advice and support at our website, itv.com/helplines.